Kate considered herself lucky. As soon as she graduated from college, a promising job came her way. In a couple of years she was already a senior manager in the company. And now Kevin came into her life. They met by a chance. Something rattled in the car, and the girl went to the car service, and she immediately liked the young mechanic. It was the end of the working day and the car had to be left for diagnostics until tomorrow. Kate was about to call a cab, as Kevin offered her a ride home. Kate decided he was a nice guy and agreed. And so began their acquaintance. They chatted all the way like old acquaintances. The girl really liked the fact that Kevin could maintain a conversation, and was quite well read. He made the impression of a confident man who knows what he wants from life. Kate decided it was love at first sight. He was the kind of guy every girl dreams about. Smart, handsome, with his own apartment and a job with a good salary. And most importantly, he looked at Kate so tenderly and reverently, as people look at the dearest and closest person. A week later, Kevin proposed to her. They sat in a cafe and waited for their order. When they brought the cakes, Kate decided that she didn't want to, because she had to think about her figure, so she moved her plate away. The guy suddenly started to blush, and then said that this is a special cake and Faith is waiting for a surprise. Kate gently moved the cream and suddenly noticed the ring. She smiled in surprise, and Kevin said that as soon as he met her he realized that she was special. He had been looking for her all his life and wants to be together forever. The girl happily exhaled and agreed. The next day they chose a date for the wedding and began planning. The girl had a close friend, Rose, with whom she worked together, and Kate invited her to her wedding. Rose was surprised and even choked on the coffee she was drinking, but she was happy to congratulate her friend. They talked about details for a long time, and at the end Rose mentioned her birthday party and told Kate to make sure Kevin would be there. The party was fun and noisy. Kate stepped out for a minute into the ladies' room, and when she came back she saw Rose dancing with Kevin and whispering sweetly about something. This behavior of her best friend hurt Kate a little, but she did not show it. And then she forgot all about it. But a few weeks later she had to regret very much that she had introduced Rose and Kevin. One day Kate was sent on a business trip for a couple of days to another city. But it so happened that Kate did everything in one day and decided not to spend the night at the hotel, and return home. She drove all the way home and thought that she was going to surprise Kevin as he was only expecting her tomorrow evening. The girl carefully opened the door with her key and quietly went to the bedroom. And suddenly froze at what she saw. Kevin and Rose were lying on the bed, completely naked. Her friend was dozing on her fiancé's shoulder while he gently stroked her head. Kate involuntarily cried out. Kevin turned and froze in surprise. Tears spurted from her eyes, and after shouting at them that they were bastards, Kate rushed out of the apartment. And behind her were the laughter of Rose. The girl ran through the night city not knowing where to. In helpless despair she did not understand how she reached the bridge and climbed over the fence. She was staring into the black water and pondering. Her anger abruptly passed and she suddenly realized that Kevin was not worth her tears, much less her death, and that life was priceless. And God has a great plan for her anyway. She was horrified to think that she had almost done the worst thing in her life and slowly began to climb back over. But just then her foot slipped off and Kate hung over the river, convulsively grasping the handrail of the bridge. She screamed for help, and suddenly a strong hand grabbed her arm and dragged her back to the bridge. When the girl came to her senses, she saw her savior. It was a young, but strangely dressed and unshaven guy. Kate understood that he must be a homeless man. He was sitting on the bank and warming himself by the fire, when he suddenly noticed Kate on the bridge and rushed to her aid. Kate quietly thanked him, and then asked to sit with him by the fire. The guy said yes and offered her tea from a kettle hanging on the fire. Kate greedily drank the tea and then asked what happened to him since he was here. His name was Tony, and his parents had abandoned him when he was a child. After the orphanage he worked in construction and had a fiancée. But he had an accident at work and the doctors had to amputate his left leg. When his fiancée found out, she dumped him. And right after the hospital, a woman came to his house and brought him a new prosthetic. She convinced him that it was the usual help from the insurance, and all he had to do was sign the papers. The guy was so happy about the prosthesis that he signed all the papers without looking. And in fact, he sold his apartment. The new owners threw him out on the street and he ended up on the street without money or a place to live. The worst thing is that the woman stole all of his documents. Tony went to the police. They promised to look into it, but it had been 4 months since they had found out. Kate was shocked by what she heard. They sat around the fire half the night, and Kate even began to admire Tony's optimism. He did not consider himself unhappy, although he was a cripple without a home, a family, or a job. And then she offered her savior to stay with her for a while. The guy looked at her incredulously, hardly believing that she wanted to help him, and then agreed. And they wandered to Kate's car, parked outside Kevin's house. On the way, Kate noticed how he was limping and Tony said that the prosthesis is very uncomfortable and chafes blood. They reached Kate's apartment only in the morning. Kate gave a set of bed linen to her guest, showed him the bathroom and the sofa in the living room, and then collapsed on the bed in the bedroom and fell into a heavy sleep. In vain the alarm clock rang and the boss rang. Kate heard nothing and only woke up by lunchtime. When she entered the kitchen, Tony was baking pancakes. Kate looked at her guest with amazement. He was about 25 years old. He was a completely different man after the shower and made a pleasant impression even in Kate's old robe. Instead of one leg, a crude prosthetic was visible. The guy blushed and admitted that he had washed all his clothes, so he wore her bathrobe. Kate laughed and said that after lunch she would go to the store to buy clothes. Tony wanted to refuse, but Kate wouldn't even listen. At that moment the boss called and said that Kate was fired for her truancy, but Kate didn't care. She couldn't work with Rose. So Tony had been living at Kate's place for a month. During this time she found a clinic that made prostheses, where they fitted him with a modern prosthesis. They also restored his documents and Tony even managed to get a job. It was a pity that they could not prove any fraud with the house. The girl had completely forgotten about Kevin, and they were just friends with Tony. A month later the girl got a call from a competitor of the firm where she worked and offered Kate a job with them, and of course Kate said yes. Tony still lived with her, and a year later they got married and had a wonderful son. One day Kate met Kevin in a cafe in the city center. She could hardly recognize him. He was gaunt and flabby and had obviously started drinking. They said hello and Kevin almost cried and started complaining to her that Rose was a cheater. She put someone else's child on him and he was paying alimony for a year. He also had problems at work and some kind of bad luck started. She interrupted him and said she was in a hurry to see her son and husband. And she's gone away. She's had another life for a long time and only has a happy white streak ahead of her. Dear friends, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like the video. We really need your support.